Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more HOA stories. In this video, a homeowner association sued me for over $70,000 because of my apparently illegal rose bushes and then stole my property. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. So the first one starts like this. I own a large area of land and I spent years looking at it and thinking that something was missing. It was just so empty and I wanted to bring some beauty to it. I planted 5,000 rose bushes all around the property and it didn't take long for them to bloom and make the entire place just look more alive. I got compliments by everybody that came to visit or saw them passing by. I didn't think there was an issue, but my HOA did. So first of all, my name is Jim and the main guy in the HOA I was having issues with was Carl. Now, Carl contacted me and told me that he heard about the rose bushes I planted and told me that I had to get rid of them. He started reading me some crap from the bylaws about needing HOA approval before making any drastic changes to a property. I assumed that meant a house extension or something, not planting flowers. So not only did I not get their permission beforehand, but he informed me that I was not gonna get it after the fact either. So I was not only getting a fine for not getting prior approval, but for having them. I thought it was not fair and went to talk to him and tried to get this whole thing sorted out. Me, you're acting like I put a pile of flaming tires on my property. It is just flowers. Carl, Jim, it's not just about the fact you planted some flowers. First of all, you planted a lot of bushes. That is going to use a huge amount of water to keep them alive and maintain them. Not to mention if they die, it would look horrible. Me, I know how to take care of my plants. You cannot just ban flowers because they might die. Carl, if we allow you to do this, then it blows the door wide open for everybody else. Nobody will get permission and then we will have land disputes about things being built too close to property lines or people building who knows what attached to their homes. It sets a dangerous precedent. Me, I'm not getting rid of them. Carl, that is your prerogative, but I need to tell you that the next step for this is gonna be a courtroom. So guys, he was threatening to sue me over roses. Most people would be thrilled from a ton of beautiful roses, but he was acting like I committed some horrible crime. I wanted to let things go to court because I really believed that a judge would side with me and see that Carl and the HOA were just power hungry and trying to squeeze the members for every penny they had. I admit that looking back, I should have taken the court case a little more serious, gotten a good lawyer to help me fight it instead of just walking in thinking that it would get thrown away. The first time we were meant to appear in court, I never got the notice and had to appeal to the court in order to get a new date since I was never notified. This meant it being pushed and, in the meantime, still getting fines from the HOA telling me that I had to pay them for my illegal rose bushes. We went to court and I tried to make my point that flowers are good for a community and the environment. That having them causes no harm to anybody and in fact removing them would mean the death of them all. The judge told me that my points really had nothing to do with the case and he ruled in favor of the HOA's claims against me. So that meant I owed them $70,000 and they were given permission to come onto my property and remove every single rose bush I had. Which I still feel was excessive. They could have left some and still made their point. My yard looked horrible and it took a year for the new grass seed to fully fill in the gaps and look like a good property again. I was fuming, but I felt like there was nothing I could do to fight them on this. They won in court, so the story should be over, right? Well, not exactly, because I waited for an opportunity to strike, either by my own hand or karma, and that happened once the pandemic hit and things started to get complicated and rough for everybody. The government was handing out grants and support left and right just to try and keep the country running. People know about the household checks people got, but what most people didn't read up on was the help being given to non-profit organizations. Those still needed to run, and once the pandemic hit, their funds were draining fast and not getting many donations. The government stepped in and created a way for them to also get some financial relief. It turns out that my HOA decided that they are a non-profit organization and had a right to apply for one of these grants. It was approved and my guess was that things were so crazy and nobody was checking things too thoroughly in the worldwide panic. It turns out that HOAs are a type of organization that did not qualify, but they went ahead and took the money anyway, with their claims being it was to keep community areas running during that time. Even though everything was closed and the only cost would just be cleaning and maybe some maintenance. Not too much money that they should have had more than enough to do without faking being eligible for government money. So once things calmed down and the government was able to track down everything and make sure it was good, they were caught red-handed. It was a huge deal and everybody knew that the HOA was being sued by the government for fraud, claiming that they were a non-profit to get the money that they were not even meant to have. Plus, on top of what we got to learn where that money went, the members of the HOA, including Carl from earlier, were taking this money and slowly sifting it into their own pockets little by little, writing it off for things that, when looking closely, were already being paid for out of another account. Not exactly like keeping 2 sets of books like criminals did back in the day, but the modern equivalent of it. Lucky for them that all of the money was able to be recovered by the government, but they were still in heaps of trouble. Even more once we got news of something else they did. This time it was not just the government going after them, but the entire neighborhood, and I was personally going to make sure that they got the worst punishment possible. This may vary, but in my county the local government stopped all HOA fees during the pandemic. And that lasted for about 2.5 years before it was pulled back on. The HOA was informed of this and they were supposed to not take money from any of us during that entire time period. Yet I was still paying them HOA fees, as was everybody else in the community. This was more fraud and theft from them. A class action lawsuit was started against the HOA in order to get the money back. With me knocking on doors and making sure everybody knew. The more people involved, the stronger the case would be and the more money they would have to fork over. Carl was freaking out and I was just smiling and enjoying the view. He even approached me to try and talk his way out of things. Carl, can you just stop going around with a damn clipboard? You know damn well the government just milked us. Me, no, they took back money you should never have applied for. Milking would be what you did to everybody living here. Carl, it was money that you all would have been paying anyway. Me, did you miss everything going on or hit your head and forget? There was a worldwide crisis. People lost jobs, people were not able to afford food. We were supposed to be able to keep some of our money to help us get by during hard times. And instead of supporting the community like you claim you want, you decide to hurt it even more. Carl, this is not about the money. It's about you being mad about your stupid roses. Me, you told me then that following rules was important and letting me get away with it would set a bad precedent. It would be bad to let one HOA off with screwing over their homeowners, others might start to do it too, huh? Carl, you really are one spiteful a-hole, you know that? Me, I would rather be spiteful than a criminal. I didn't stop there and had almost every single person living in the HOA sign up for the class action lawsuit. Everybody wanted money back and before long I was back in a courtroom faced with the HOA and Carl. The entire neighborhood couldn't show up and speak, but since I had such a big part in getting things off the ground, I was there with a lawyer representing the people of the HOA. This time, when the judge wanted an explanation, it was Carl's turn to say a bunch of stuff that didn't matter to the lawsuit. He claimed that the money was needed in order to keep facilities and other community areas clean and safe. That the money was used towards good things and they shouldn't be punished for trying to keep the neighborhood from falling apart during a crisis. Our lawyer pointed out that they had a large sum of money they illegally acquired from the government, claiming for it to be used for the same thing. As well as the HOA prior to the pandemic having money put aside that was more than enough to cover any expenses. Most importantly, none of what they used it for mattered because they were directly told by the government not to charge HOA fees. They went directly against a rule set in stone and you can be sure that they were in trouble for more than just a civil lawsuit. Criminally, they were in trouble with the government again for basically the same charges, but this time stealing from people instead of a government institution. So then in the end, the judge demanded the HOA pay $500,000 for the money that they stole from every single homeowner affected. That was a nice chunk for everybody, but I was still not satisfied yet. That would not come until I learned what the district attorney was gonna do with this whole mess from the criminal end. Being back in front of a judge for the same crimes a second time got them zero sympathy. The fraud for the grant they were willing to believe was a mistake and not knowing they didn't qualify. Stealing from people while obviously knowing what they were doing was wrong, they would not get away with. A few of the HOA board members were given jail time, with the more minor members walking away with probation. What this meant for the HOA as a whole was a mess that lasted a few months. The neighborhood was kind of split in half about what it wanted. Half wanted no more HOA because they couldn't trust one again after the entire mess. The other half wanted a new HOA made up of new people, thinking that it would be better this time. Nobody could decide what should be done, so we had to all meet again for the weirdest HOA meeting in existence. Nobody was in charge since there was no current HOA, and instead the entire thing had to be taken to a vote with people arguing on both sides. In case you are bad at assuming things, I was on the side of no more HOA. There was no guarantee the new people wouldn't be just as bad as the old ones. My side won, and at least for now, the HOA was fully disbanded here. With no rules to follow, that meant I could do anything I wanted with my property and not getting crap for it. So I took my fat check from the lawsuit and bought, you guessed it, rose bushes. I planted those bad boys again, and the only thing that would have made things better was if Carl watched as each and every single one went into the ground. Even if another HOA was formed in the future and had the same rules, it would not matter. The roses would be pre-existing and no HOA could do anything about it. I wish that I was able to personally get revenge or something, but it turned out that a crappy HOA is also good at shooting itself in the foot. Edit, I love people telling me other things that I could do to bother Carl with my rose bushes. I forgot to mention that he was one of the people getting a jail sentence. I don't know if he will move back here after or go somewhere else, but be assured that if he comes back here, I will do something like give him some of the roses just to show how nice of a neighbor I am. Also, I saw people talking about how the rosebush water issue is a thing due to water shortages in areas. I'm not in one of those areas, and the normal regulation for my sprinklers would not have changed from the grass in those spots being watered. Edit number 2, I forgot to mention, this story did not happen in the United States. And dear Ripe Stars, I gotta say, even though this was apparently not an American HOA, I'm of course still happy that they got disbanded in the end. One HOA gone off the face of the earth is the best thing that could happen on any day. Anyway, the next one is an insane neighbor story. So, story time. There's this old guy that lives across the street from me. We will call him T, and T is in his early 80s. His wife died about 6 to 7 years ago, and now he lives alone. Over the past while, I've checked in on T to see how he's doing, bringing him some homemade meals every so often, giving him rides to the grocery store and shopping with him, making sure his companion cat has food and just generally trying to be a good, caring, thoughtful neighbor and friend to a dude who probably needs it. Today, while I was working, T called me up and asked if I could bring him to the store, and I said, sure, of course, I need to go there myself. I'll see you at 5:30 after I get off work. So off we go, he gets his list of groceries, I grab a few things and back to his house we go to unload and get things put away. While doing so for the very first time, he brings up religion, which is also when I realized that I was wearing a t-shirt with an image of Baphomet on it. T is really respectful, says that he's Christian, I acknowledge that I don't believe and I thought that was that. Well, it wasn't. He goes on to expand how he believes that the rapture is soon to come. We're talking like next week soon. I do that whole, okay, sure, polite, non-argumentative thing, mentally checked out of the conversation but present enough to respond appropriately and yet politely not agreeing. At the end, he says, the only reason I bring it up is to ask you something. What is that? I responded. If it does happen, can you watch over my cat if I'm gone? He asks. Y'all, for real, I wasn't ready for that. Not at all where I thought he was going with it. Of course I said, yes of course, and backed it up with saying, no matter what happens or why you may not be around anymore, if your cat is still around, she'll be in good hands with me. Like on one hand, it's an absolutely hilarious situation, but damn, the heartfelt earnest of it got me. Sweet but silly all at once. Anyone else had an experience even remotely similar? Edit number 1. Wow, thanks everyone for all the wonderful comments and sorts of both support and of concern for T. I cannot reply to everyone, but I just wanted to say this. So, we all have a choice in how we approach the world. We can do so in a positively impactful way, or we can do so in a way that isn't. It's completely your choice, and who am I to say which is more valid or responsible? I choose to conduct myself in a way that I perform acts of service for my community without and free of the thoughts or beliefs that doing so will return some sort of eternal reward. I urge everyone to do the same. None of us get out of this alive, so we may as well support and uplift each other when and where we can. Edit number 2. Hot damn y'all, thank you so much for the comments and love. By the way, for all those wondering, the cat's name is Lily. She is a super sweet orange and white fluff ball. Be kind to each other. We never know what someone else is going through in their life, and a simple offhand moment of kindness to your fellow human could mean the absolute world to them, and for you it's just another Tuesday. Edit number 3, finding it kind of funny and a little disheartening that I've received so many "you cannot be atheist and Satanist" type comments. Folks, read up on the differences between theistic Satanism, a vanishingly small segment of those who identify as Satanist, and modern TST, and some aspects of Church of Satan, aligned Satanism. I use Satan and Satanism first and foremost as a way to utilize the social connotation of the imagery to set oneself apart visibly and for its othering aspects mentally. I can get down with the 7 tenets, but I don't consider myself a TST Satanist or member. At my core, I guess you could say I'm fundamentally a humanist with Baphomet wallpaper. Read up a little bit before making an uninformed comment. Update to the story: obviously the rapture didn't happen. I've seen T several times before and after the day, and he seems to be doing okay. He hasn't referenced the date being missed, and I haven't pressed the issue. Overall, I imagine he must be somewhat embarrassed, but who am I to rub that in, you know? The cat is doing well also, and I brought her over since some nice freeze-dried salmon treats yesterday for him to give her. Either way it goes, I'm still being the exact same sort of neighbor as I was before this, offering help when and how I can, providing that help if asked, and going over to just chat with him on the front porch for a while. If he never brings it up again, that's just fine by me. I just wish him a content and fruitful life for however long he has left. Update number 2, OP here, you can start at any time. There's nothing holding you back from being the person Mr. Rogers would want you to be. Good works for your fellow human don't have to be grand gestures or actions. Sometimes it's as simple and small as offering someone else the same compliment that you would want to hear for yourself. Update number 3, there's never anything but oneself stopping them from being a compassionate, empathetic, and good person. I have my faults, as we all do, and I'm sometimes prone to anger and resentment. I'm no role model, but I do make a conscious decision each morning when I wake up to confront the day with grace and forgiveness, and to extend that to my fellow human when and where reasonable and just. Be the person Mr. Rogers would want you to be, nothing is stopping you. Take care of and be kind to yourself, my friend. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So me and my old man never really had a great relationship. He was an overly aggressive control freak and thought he knew everything and tried to dominate every aspect of my life. From what friends I hung out with, to what clubs I went to, and what subjects I chose later in school. There was this one time I happened to mention in passing that I liked the idea of becoming a chef with no actual intention of ever becoming a chef. I wanted to be an engineer, telecommunications or structural or something. I just liked cooking my own food from time to time and enjoyed it. I don't know what it was about me becoming a chef, but my dad thinks it's a great idea and then went on to dictate the course of my school life to becoming a chef. In the end, I joined the army just to get away from him and never really spoke to him since. That was until the whole pandemic thing started. By then I had my fill of the military life and had left for a more chill civilian life. I was living in a nice part of the country, looking out over the coast and doing quite well for myself in network engineering. The last I had spoken to my father was just before I quit the army. I thought for some reason he might be able to provide me with some actual guidance and courage, but no. All he had left to say was that I was gonna be throwing my life away if I left, and I put in all that work for nothing and so on. Anyway, a few years on and the pandemic hits. Like most, I lose a lot of work and I'm budgeting like crazy, doing what I can from home. It's not too bad, but I could do with a little extra as I had just bought a house and would be struggling if the lockdown lasted too long. Luckily, I get a call from my dad. He tells me that he needs somewhere to stay as he is having to camp out in fields. All the camping grounds have been closed down and he is stuck. As much as I have it in for my old man, he is still my father and I would help him anyway anytime. After some precautions, testing and whatnot, I let him stay at my house, so as long as he paid towards the bills he was happy enough with that, and so we settled in for the long haul. It was alright at first, his universal credits paid up each month. We set it up so that he was considered my tenant, so the benefits got paid straight into my account after signing up on some paperwork. Once the lockdown was done, he would move on. Had I known it was gonna take years for things to get back to normality, I would never have taken him in. When I asked him about why he couldn't go back home, he tells me that he sold it and all of his stuff. He is now one of these free livers or something, people that live off the grid, off the land sort of thing. I thought he meant a commune, but nope, he is just a drifter, or maybe a grifter, not sure. Every now and then he rents a room at a travel lodge or a bed and breakfast or something to get cleaned up and stuff, spends most nights at a cheap campsite. He was always a little vague on why he decided to be one of these people that live off the land, mumbling some incoherent crap about zero carbon footprint, and honestly, I should have been more persistent and suspicious of this, but being my old man, I could hardly grill him on his own affairs. The thing is, since the lockdown, all the campsites, holiday parks and whatnot have all closed down, so he has nowhere to pitch his tent. He tells me that he got chased from a farmer's field more than a few times and even had one shoot at him. So the months drag on, things get tense between us, but the house is a decent size enough that we don't have to be in too close proximity to each other, but it's still a little awkward. The lockdowns go by fine and life slowly gets back to normal. My dad talks about getting out into the countryside again and I start looking for work. I get a job out in South Korea for a month or so I, for some stupid reason, ask my dad if he would like to house sit for a little while. He is more than enthusiastic about the idea, and once again, I get a little niggle at the back of my mind, and I should have listened to that niggle. I keep in touch with my father and make sure everything is okay, and at first he is telling me the going-ons with the house, how things are faring, and everything is fine. Till last week, things are getting a little vague and distant, and I'm crapping myself that something is wrong. Confirmation hits when I manage to get home, and only I cannot get in my home. The locks have been changed. I call a locksmith, and by the time he gets to my house, my father has also come home and sees me. He starts shooting off at me, telling me to stop harassing him and the like. I'm so bloody confused, I don't even know what to say or do. I'm trying to find out why he has changed the locks, but just keeps shouting for me to stop harassing him. I get the police involved, and the locksmith is not touching the door, as he does not think I have the right to change the locks, and when the police do arrive, they defuse the situation and start interviewing everyone. The poor locksmith is looking so lost. About an hour of talking and debating, it turns out that I cannot do anything, as the tenant has a right to change the locks if he feels he is being harassed by the landlord. He even has a record of all the messages on his phone that I've sent him and all the phone calls I've been making, checking on the house. I couldn't believe it. My head goes into a wild spin and I feel like I'm in EastEnders or something. It made my stomach churn. As I'm talking to solicitors about this, renting a bloody room above a takeaway, feeling like crap, I wonder if things could get worse. I had tried to get some of my stuff back, but my father tells me that he does not want to see me around his house anymore, or else he will kill me. He has some BS legal right to defend himself. He literally evicted me from my own property. So I'm having to use the public library to get on the internet. I've had to buy all new clothes, and as I'm in talks with a solicitor, and they inform me that my father has accumulated over $300,000 in debt. The sort of debt the banks would seize a house over and all its contents. So not only am I under the threat of losing my house to my father, but there's the very real chance that he stole my house from me so that the banks would seize it and finally be clear of his debt. I mean, seriously, you could not make this up. Even if you were one of those writers on Coronation Street or some other really cheap naff soap opera. The best I could hope for, seeing as we were in a tenant-landlord relationship, was to have him evicted. So I went through the legal channels, set up a routine inspection sort of thing, and drum up every reason to have him kicked out. I couldn't believe it when it actually worked. One of the key clauses of renting is that the tenant has to make sure they maintain the property they are staying in, and my house was not looked after in the slightest. So I immediately wrote out the eviction notice. I tell you, justice never tasted sweeter than when my old man tried to contest the eviction and even took it to the civil courts. I was worried at first, but my solicitor assured me there was no chance that he was gonna win. God bless my solicitor for this, but he even said he would bring my father's debt to the court's attention. Now, not only is my father homeless again, but he doesn't have any assets for the banks to seize. He had to do community service instead. The only downside was that my house was in a damn awful mess. The day my dad was forced out of my house was one of the best of my life, but seeing what he had done to my beautiful home left me fuming. I decided then and there that I wasn't done making my scumbag father pay for what he did to me. So I pressed charges against him and took him to court for illegal eviction, threats of violence, squatting, and destruction of property. My lawyer presented evidence of the debt he accrued and suspected fraud. In the end, the court ordered him to pay damages, sentenced him to 15 months in jail for the threats and eviction, and assigned him 200 hours extra of community service for the property damage. It felt so good to get justice. My father thought he could walk all over me, but I did not back down. Now he is sitting in jail thinking about what a horrible thing he did to his own son. Maybe someday he will come out a changed man, but I'm sure as hell not holding my breath. I'm just glad I stood up for myself and proved he couldn't get away with stealing my home. The law came down on my side in the end, and that's all that matters. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.